Let's unpack some of this and give you some more context. Max Hess is here. He's a fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute. He joins me live. Max, let's just kick it off with your latest thoughts on the death of Alexei Navalny. The critics say, and of course even some within the White House say, this puts blood on Putin's hands, but is it necessarily a surprise?
Well, thank you for having me, Dan. Sadly, I think it isn't a surprise. Alexei Navalny was not sent to a colony in the Arctic Circle for any reason other than to put him in a position where he could and ultimately eventually did lose his life. So I think it is clear that his blood is on Putin's hands. What it symbolizes is twofold. One, that Putin feels he can continue to get away with such actions without major additional international repercussions. And secondly, a reminder that this war also involves the continuing and escalating crackdown of what tiny iota remained of political freedoms in Russia, and that support for Ukraine is not only support for its liberation and freedom against Putin's invasion, but also for the idea that one day there can be some kind of alternative in Russia and a better future there that doesn't see its population put to the slaughter in such a wanton war.
Max, what did you also make of the latest headlines around Trump and NATO? Trump saying pay up or face Russia's consequences. Ultimately, the key takeaway from the Munich Security Conference was that global security is still on high alert and there are a number of unknowns still ahead. What did we learn?
You know, I think Trump's comments are not really something new for him. We've seen him make similar criticisms of NATO before. The reality is, however, is that Europe is unprepared for this still, even today. And frankly, even in the back of Trump's comments, given how large the lift and the need to potentially replace the U.S. is to have some kind of new European defense structure. The Estonian prime minister has raised an idea of $100 billion in bonds to fund a European defense army. And while certainly I support those actions, we have to be honest and say not only is getting that past the German government and the FDP in particular very unlikely, but then even then it will take years, if not decades, of that kind of spending for Europe to build up a credible deterrent and rival defense capability to the United States. So I think there needs to be a realistic understanding of that on both sides of it. When understanding Trump's position on these negotiations, it's important to keep in mind that, Trump really sees his 2019 impeachment, which was technically over, not allowing additional Ukraine aid that Congress had legislated for. He, supposedly held it as blackmail against Zelensky to try to get dirt on Biden in exchange, saying he would only release it if Zelensky did that. So Trump really sees this current debate in Congress as a potential attempt to lay what he calls a trap to limit his potential ability for diplomacy with Russia. And so he's really leaning hard on congressional Republicans to hold that up. And we saw that just hours before Navalny's death was announced. Congress went on holiday rather than pass crucial Ukraine aid. That bill, of course, will come back up. But from the Democrat side, there's, of course, the U.S. budget ceiling in the beginning of March. How much they're willing to bring that into those negotiations and put it forward, I think, will be a real test of their commitment and willing to use this as an electoral issue as well.
Max, is it fair to say that the only off-ramp for Russia's war in Ukraine is a political election in the United States?
I certainly don't think we're going to see any change from Putin before that time. There has been some briefing by very Kremlin-friendly sources that, Putin would maybe be interested in some kind of peace negotiations now. But I don't see that as credible. Even if there were, it would be just to wait until that election and build up for a larger attack on Ukraine again. It's very clear to me that Vladimir Putin sees the only acceptable outcome to him as being one in which all of southern and eastern Ukraine on the eastern side of the Dnieper River, from Kiev to Kharkiv to Zaporozhye, cities that still have millions and millions of people and that have been subject to his missile strikes, but not the brunt of the Russian army, as we've seen, has destroyed the town of Avdiivka over the last 10 years. So, I think we have to be very realistic about this, that Putin is dedicated to this for the long haul. And just as Joe Biden and other leaders said back in 2022, the West will support Ukraine for as long as it takes. Now is the crucial time that we have to honor and meet that commitment if we are serious about it. Otherwise, we have to recognize that this will not only be a Russian war in Ukraine now, but further ones to come in the future.
Max, really appreciate your analysis today. We're out of time. We'll leave it there. Thanks so much for joining me. Max Hess there from the Foreign Policy Research Institute.